you needed an island of freedom, if you will, because there's certain frameworks for innovation that need to exist. Think big, start small, scale fast.
Welcome to Lean Stories. I'm Jonathan Bertfield, CEO at Lean Startup Co. This is where we dive deep with practitioners from around the world who discovered the transformative power of the Lean Startup methodology. In each of our episodes, you'll hear authentic stories from product leaders and innovators across industries and geographies and how they discovered the lean principles that could be a pivotal moment for them that changed their approach and the real world impact of putting their customers at the center of everything they build. In the notes below, you'll find information about our guest and about getting in touch with Lean Startup Co. So today we're speaking to Ngu Morcho, who has become a good friend of mine over the last couple of months. So welcome, Ngu. It's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. As you know, I've really been looking forward to having this conversation with you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Me too. All right, well, let's jump in. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what have been some of those kind of career moments that have led you to the place where you're at today.
Well, as you said, thanks for that. As you said, my name is Ngu Morcho. I was born and raised in Cameroon in Central Africa. Went to college in the UK, and then came to the US, served in the US Navy, and have since had a very interesting career, starting in healthcare and pharmaceutical sales, and then early stage venture capital, moving to general management with the General Electric, the healthcare division in Africa, then becoming an entrepreneur, starting a couple of businesses, and now my latest approach. But I would describe myself as somebody who's got a deep passion for helping people and businesses achieve transformational growth, really through developing new markets and launching new products. And that's how come my relationship with Lean Startup started. So I've been an impact entrepreneur with over 30 years of working experience in mostly project development, finance, and delivery across healthcare and impact infrastructure, like I mentioned. We've worked across the US and Africa, launched several businesses. Now, when I look at business as an impact entrepreneur, I focus on three pillars, right? Cash flow, equity for stakeholders, and then impact. So I always come back to those three. We look at projects where we can generate cash flow or that are generating cash flow, where we can have an equity position and share risk and build a balance sheet, and also where we can make impact in the communities where we operate.
What was one of the specific problems or challenges that you confronted where you said, I think we need a different approach, and I think we need to think about how we build products and businesses in a different way?
I think I would put it in one phrase: it's business model innovation, right? I think there's so many classic business models that are deployed from corporate to go to market, and those models, when they hit the marketplace, they fall flat or they fail. And so there's always a need for something new. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Now, the macro problem that we're currently solving is looking at Africa and its need for infrastructure and its risk to climate change or climate change related damages. And we'll talk about why Africa needs $180 billion a year in infrastructure and over $280 billion a year for climate mitigation and adaptation, and what those opportunities present, and where Lean Startup can play a great role in helping Africa and emerging markets take advantage of climate change, kind of as a Trojan horse to leapfrog. The gaps that I see in markets: impact infrastructure, project development expertise, validated technology, lack of project delivery, and a focus on sustainability. Now, to put all of those together, you need a new way of thinking, right? So I'll give you some background. I worked at GE, General Electric, as the head of project development in Africa. We launched a project called Project Eagle Eye, and the idea was to develop a network of diagnostic centers. My task, we were being measured on how many GE systems we sold. But the market wasn't designed for you to just go engage a hospital buyer and just sell. So you had to create a project that would educate the marketplace, that would communicate a reduced risk of engagement to investors, that would also reduce risk for GE to put some skin in the game, such that the customer could buy in bulk so you could achieve your targets. So that required us to come up with this new model. And then GE was one of the first adopters as a corporate entity to use Lean Startup. They called it FastWorks. So I was one of the few folks that was introduced to that, and I fell madly in love with it. So on the basis of that, I built this project. I encouraged the leadership team to put some skin in the game, worked with the World Bank, put some skin in the game, worked with a European operator, put some skin in the game, and we created literally from a concept paper this project that eventually got funding and was eventually deployed a couple of years after I left GE. That's when I realized, hello, there is a new way to do business. Now, at the same time, I was watching my GE colleagues in India create a new business model, this company called GenWorks, which was created by former GE colleagues, which is now one of the most successful healthcare delivery technology companies in India. But because employees within GE looked at the marketplace and said, our traditional go-to-market doesn't work. So we need to innovate around that. And they were able to create a business that still served customer needs, but used a different go-to-market. That's when I realized Lean Startup has a great place in emerging markets, and it's really the right way to build innovation where big corporates, big institutional investors, and emerging or fragile markets or decentralized markets exist.
What was clear in that business building effort that was distinct from how you've been doing it before, or how previous methods had been applied?
So traditional, when you work with a corporation like a GE Healthcare or any other multinational that is in medical equipment services and medical equipment sales, you have a client list, you go to the client and you negotiate and close and get an order. And the client books and you book the sale and you get rewarded for that. It's point of sale. But if the market is not mature, if financing is not in place, you have to create it, right? So you have to work with, in my case, Bank of Industry, IFC, to create an instrument that worked so that the client risk can be taken. If the customer doesn't understand the need for investment, not just in the equipment, but in after-sales service, so that they can reduce their total cost of ownership, there's an education that is required for that. If the customer doesn't have the infrastructure because the government doesn't have insurance enough, less than 5% of Nigerians are insured under the National Health Insurance Scheme, you have to help them build a primary care and referral system that will prime patients to their centers so they can sell more services and recoup their investment. So there was an ecosystem, there was a need to think from an ecosystem perspective, even though the incentive, the culture from the corporate was rewarding you for point of sale, but the market required you to think from an ecosystem perspective to be able to deliver a service or product that could actually be sold. So there was this healthy tension or misalignment between what the corporate go-to-market was and what the market go-to-market required.
How did you bridge that tension? How did you, what were some of the methods you used?
That's why, for example, in the India example, which is what gave me the impetus to create this project, which eventually gave me the impetus to leave GE and start my own company, I saw they had to spin off a company outside of GE to go launch a new business. You needed an island of freedom, if you will, right? Because there's certain frameworks for innovation that need to exist. I think you, as a lean startup expert, you have these 5 or 6 pillars that need to exist for lean startup to really take hold. And oftentimes, there's tension when you have an existing infrastructure within corporate, existing strategy, culture, measures, and metrics and governance that is different from an experiment type environment where you have to build, measure, and learn before you go to market. There's always a need for a new entity or a new island of freedom where the entire culture of lean, of experimenting, of build, measure, learning, letting data drive decision making instead of personalities. So there was always a need to create something new. This is when I realized either within GE, I wanted to create something new, or I had to leave to create something else because I needed an island of freedom within which to build this new culture.
When you're building your business now, right, and you're working with various partners and, there's inevitably challenges, how are you injecting that lean startup mindset, that entrepreneurial spirit?
The lean startup principles, the methodology is built around this build, measure, learn loop, which at FastWorks we called it discover, generate, experiment, and go to market. I would scale, right? With kind of similar loops, right? You get some discovery, you generate data, experiment, and then go to market and test. So you go through that loop. So my business is built around that kind of iteration innovation loop. Today at Vitalaria, we're launching a project development and delivery as a service. It's a platform for first-of-a-kind emergent climate tech and smart infrastructure projects. So I'm expanding beyond healthcare to include emergent climate tech and smart infrastructure. Why? Because healthcare is at the end of the service delivery ecosystem, value chain. Most economies, most people cannot afford healthcare until they have a job. And most people don't have a job in most economies if that economy is not industrialized, if there's no mechanization, or there's no system that will employ people and actually give them health insurance or better health benefits. So even though I grew up professionally working in health infrastructure and building health ecosystems, I've realized for me to be a market maker, to successfully feed that market, I've got to reach back and address the issues of energy access or cost of energy, which is over 30% of the cost of most hospitals. Address the cost of capacity building, which human capital is over another 30% of the cost of most hospitals. Address access to finance, which is pervasive across most economies, even in the US, by the way. This is not unique to Africa, by the way. And the rate of uninsured folks is growing. So, and most of that is tied to debilitating infrastructure. So you realize that all of that is connected. Now, so what we do today at Vitalaria is we've built a company that is built on learning, iterating, learning, and then developing products, because the capital required to get these products to market is usually high, and most investors cannot deploy tens of millions of dollars and wait 3 years for result. So we have to bite size our progress. We have to develop metrics and measures where the investor or the stakeholders understand we're trying to learn about these five clients and what their behavior is. And then we're going to learn about another 50 and another 500, kind of those 10x iterations. That's how you build a business now, right? Instead of hiring a whole team, getting a big office and doing a whole big campaign slowly, because I've had enough failures to realize that building in a highly volatile market requires this lean startup way of thinking to be able to deploy a new product, or open up a new market.
Maybe could you share an example of a failure either now or in a previous moment in your career where it was a really powerful learning experience? You anticipated something happening, didn't happen, but then you were able to really drive forward in spite of that.
So one thing that I'm getting very, very comfortable with in my later years is recognizing that what I traditionally would call failure, I went to all boys Catholic boarding school. I'm traditional, conventional, educated guy where you have to pass the test. And if you don't get an A or a B, then you feel like you're a failure. And then you go into corporate and you try things because you have these big ideas. I'm a super creative. I'm learning that about myself now. And I'm a big idea guy, and I like to be around guys who can implement strategy and deploy and think big, start small, scale fast. This is another lean startup a moniker or mantra. I'll give you 3 examples of failures across my career that have informed my thinking today. Restricted to the last 10 years. There's a bunch of more failures in my younger years. When I first went to GE, I mentioned this project, the Eagle Eye. It was an innovative idea, perfect environment for an innovator, a super creative thinker like myself. Put big picture, Eagle Eye, pitching to my boss at the time, to the growth board, all these things. Everybody's super excited, and I'm driving through, but I'm ignorant, and I'm not paying attention to the emotional pull on all the other team members who were kind of manning the ship, right? Doing the everyday stuff that allows for me to be this creative, out-of-the-box thinker on this side. Because when you are like me, you expect people to just get it. Of course, it's a good idea. This makes sense, and why not? Why can't you think outside the conventional boundaries? And when people don't think the way you think, most of them, they see you as you're either a threat, or you're distracted, you're not focused. I'm thinking I'm creating a new normal, which is what the business needs for hyper growth. They're saying, hey, we're minimizing risk, just deliver here. right? So Eagle Eye took a long time to get off the ground. We had a lot of stop and starts, and it actually didn't get launched until after I left GE because there were some macro events. The Naira dropped due to Boko Haram. Or European operators decided Nigeria was too risky. I had left the company. The project had to be restructured, but it eventually launched. It's now a very successful company. So I learned about timing, alignment, stakeholder management, and getting everybody to come along, and also not to be leading too much from the front, kind of figure out what's the best place to make everybody feel like they can take ownership. The first thing. The second thing, when I started my company, Yako Medical, after GE, I still had the same approach. I raised about $1.5 million from friends and family. We bought a couple of diagnostic services from businesses in Lagos, one from an oncology business, one from a cardiology business. And I had this idea of aggregating diagnostics from specialty care and then doing a referral such that we can optimize how medical technology services, we can kind of show you medical technology, medical equipment management services to increase access to diagnostics. I didn't realize I was, in essence, infecting my company with two very different cultures, right? One was the culture of the cardiology center, which was very different. One was the culture of the oncology center, which was different. Also, we didn't have enough runway, cash flow to go through the learning, and everybody wasn't on the same page. They didn't see 3-5 steps down the road like I was seeing. So I had to pull folks, and folks were different levels of capacity or capability and technical expertise and market knowledge or market insight, and had different levels of motivation. So what you do with Lean Startup when you guys launch is having this training, this coaching session where people understand what roles they play and the why. I didn't realize that it was an incredible change management initiative, and I needed small working teams from both sides to understand, hey, we have to think differently for this thing to work, right? So we dropped the ball on that. We burned through a lot of cash. We had to sell those businesses back out. And then I took on another approach, which was remote monitoring for cardiovascular diseases. That also had its set of challenges, right? Then I'll come to the third one, which is a recent role I had before launching Vitalaria, running a nonprofit. There, I was dealing with a board of a nonprofit that had a very clear goal about what they wanted to do, where they wanted to go. They brought me on as CEO. I had this big idea about taking this initiative. They were very focused on vision care and one particular area in vision care. And I had been working in Africa. I said, you know what? Vision care is great. This would work. But what if we could create have vision care work, but still be a feeder to primary care and chronic care, because this is what the market needs. Everybody would see that it's 1 + 1 = 11. It's a great idea. You still meet your objective, but the bigger market objective is there. And I said, look, if I just go and prove this out, I'll come back to the board and let them know, hey, look at how great this thing is. The whole time the board is thinking, this guy is out there like a Rambo. So you see there's a certain theme that gets me. After a while, I'm like, you know what? Not only do I need a new way to do this, but I need an island of freedom where everybody is on the same page, where the culture is communicated, the governance is consistent with the incentive, where you are allowed and encouraged and incentivized and rewarded for thinking big, trying new ideas, testing, failing, learning from the failing, and then proceeding, right? So this is why I created Vitalaria, because I created the kind of company that would be able to hire a super creative like myself and allow somebody like me to thrive. And that's why we're focused on the areas we're focused on right now. We do the kinds of projects we do because it requires out-of-the-box thinking. We primarily look at established technologies and climate tech in the US and in Europe. We look at established EPCs with processes, companies that know how to build infrastructure. We partner with them and then try to take them to new markets, Africa, the Caribbean, to address infrastructure deficits where there is funding, where there's catalytic capital, blended finance, which is another innovation in the financing structure, to build a project which is first of a kind. So there's a whole set of learnings. I like to solve complex problems, right? I like to design elegant solutions to complex problems. And that's why I love Lean Startup.
So what has worked for you in your experience to bring people along, right? So help them change so that they can understand the value of taking a beat, learning, and then having much more confidence moving forward because you really have challenged the assumptions.
What I find, and you're right, what I find is that there is a tribe out there that understands things like this and gets it. It's a tribe of what the Apple commercial, the Think Different commercial called crazies, right? There's a small group of us. It doesn't make us any better than anybody. We're just different. So in this, I've realized I'm very different, and I'm okay with it. Now, the other thing is there's a huge education and a huge learning curve when you're dealing with people who are conventionally incentivized to deliver on a function. So they deliver, they get motivated and rewarded for attending meetings, for attending conferences, for sending reports, generating and sending reports, and starting projects, most of which never really always end, but they need to show activity.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I've been that guy before. I've been in sales where you get activity-related reward, and then I learned I like results, and I'm impatient, right? Because the market I serve, if we don't do what we do, people die. If we don't provide energy access, kids cannot read and they can't go to school. They can't live out humanity. If I don't deliver healthcare, folks don't get treatment and they may die, and they do die. And if we don't help build the roads, the governments won't do it. If we don't help help the farmers learn how to generate regenerative agriculture, they won't get fed. There's a cascade of events. And I can no longer wait for the normal pace of society to deliver. So I'm impatient and I want to move quick, right? So what I do now is I find within organizations, change agents, disciples, folks who are eagerly frustrated with the normal. And I recruit them. It's an onerous process. But the more of this, when you go on this search, it's like the pink elephant, right? Once you mention it, all of a sudden you start seeing a pink elephant, right? So you find there are communities of people, there are communities of philanthropy, foundations that are tired of the traditional way nonprofit works. They're looking for a new way to innovate. There's donor advised funds. There's venture funds that invest in climate tech, but that are specifically looking to impact economies that are most at risk, not just investing in climate tech for the sake of saying, hey, look, I'm doing a climate tech fund, but I'm really using it to transform society, right? There are EPCs that have impact arms that are saying, look, yes, we're a tier 1 EPC and we do great work, but our impact arm really wants to change the world. So there are industrial firms that have as a mandate decarbonization and sustainability to reduce carbon emissions by a certain fraction by 2030, 2050, and in so doing industrialize the world and drive the world into an energy efficient world, right? So I partner with those entities. They're funding firms that have a long-term view. For example, one thing we think about is evergreen fund or permanent capital vehicles are standards, the new way to go. I don't believe in a typical PE fund or typical venture fund model as a standalone. Whatever we work on, we try to build permanent capital vehicles or evergreen funds because these things, the markets where we work need a 20, 30-year approach or think of philosophy or plan, right? So you have to think different. And then as you think differently, you have to recruit people and advocates, disciples that think similarly and build this community. And within that community, you have hopefully a consistency in how you're governed, the usual pillars that you have. And I think you guys, you express it very well there. You got to have governance, you got to have the right teams, you got to have the right strategy, finance, in my case, technology systems, culture, and milestones. For us, these are the 7 pillars that are critical in every case to make a good team, a good lean startup-driven business work.
Decision-making is a key part of governance. How do you ensure that those stakeholders who are making the decisions have what they need in order to make that decision, right? Because at the team level, I often find it's a lot easier to get teams to generate a body of evidence that's really in support of the journey that they're on, or is showing that we've got traction, we're showing that we're giving customers value. Leaders tend to be a little bit more resistant to adopting those kinds of approaches to thinking about customers and the experience as a driver of traction and therefore investment. What have you done to kind of bring those leaders along to help them understand the role that they need to play?
Well, if you remember at the beginning, I said the business focus, the three pillars we look at right now is cash, equity, and impact, right? Now, if you thread those across every activity, first you want to make sure the business has cash flow, right? So I don't like to deal with a business that doesn't have any cash flow, because then business decisions are not rational. And everybody's they're thinking from a protection of position instead of a generation of business. So first, ideally, the technology has to be generating cash in some way. Then now we can have ownership, which is equity. So the second thing is you have to build in equity. Every single person that is in the business has to be an owner of some sort. All the stakeholders have to have ownership, because then decision making cannot be you cannot be beholden to a small group, right? So if I am your employee or your advisor or broker, you can fire me, right? So if I don't say what you want to hear, you can say, you know what, I don't believe that. I don't agree with that. And I'm good with that. Then I can't think freely. I can't give you my honest opinion based on my years of experience and my market knowledge and expertise. But if I'm an aligned risk-sharing partner, and we share risk on the upside, but you're also sharing some of your cash with me for us to work, you are more likely to listen. And then the third aspect is the impact. If we build into the incentive and the deliverables the sustainability aspect of the business, then those three legs are balanced. So it's taking those three legs, cash, equity, and impact, and infusing it into those 7 pillars that I talked about, right? So the governance structure assures that we deal with cash, equity, and impact in the following manner. That is tracked at the governance. The teams are arranged in such a manner that decision is made at the person who's closest to the end user, right? So the decision maker is the person closest to the end customer or user. So they're empowered. The strategy is dynamic enough, built around build, measure, learn. So that's implicit. The kind of funding you get is based on the risk threshold. So you get non-dilutive funding in the beginning when the risk is much highest, where the failure opportunity is highest, to get over that bridge. And then you get kind of concessional debt and equity, and then growth, commercial debt and equity in the third phase. The technology that you deploy has to be consistent with the mission, the kind of culture, and then the milestones are all consistent with aligning with those 3 pillars. So that's how you knit these things together.
Yeah.
So
okay. So as we're wrapping up here, what's the next exciting experiment that you're planning to run in one of your projects?
over the last 3 years, I've been working on this Vitalaria platform, which expands my focus on healthcare to climate tech and infrastructure, with a particular primary focus on Africa, but it's a global play. So we are launching a project development and delivery as a service platform, which is a first of a kind. So this is a platform that will take existing validated climate tech solutions and go into markets where there is a climate policy, an energy transition policy, an industrialization policy, and see how we can help those markets unlock blended finance, catalytic capital, and build and deliver those projects so we can A, drive economic opportunity, B, improve the environment, and C, increase energy access, which adds to the GDP of the country, right? We're not anti-fossil, we're fossil and, because we think there's a great place for this decarbonization and sustainability economy. Because ultimately, if I want people to live longer, which is at the core of my healthcare purpose, if you're not working, if you're not earning a living, you're not going to be able to live long. So I want to industrialize this economy. So our company is working on this. We're partnering with certain platforms that have also done this in the US. and building on a model that's comparable, that's been done, a development as a service model that was launched in the US in 2024. And we're right now inviting folks to think about and participate and co-create with us so we can launch this new model for the global South. So we're very excited. The model requires focus on impact fellowships, right? So folks that we need to recruit who will be entrepreneurs that will use the lean startup methodology combined with our methodology to go be business leaders. We require venture technology entrepreneurs who have created new technologies that have been backed by venture capital to partner with us so we can be a development arm for their technologies in new markets. We require donors and philanthropy to provide blended finance on the first phase to de-risk the project. We also require governments and corporates who are working in this space to come in and de-risk. They can be off-takes and help us build bigger projects. So we're building an ecosystem that we hope can industrialize emerging markets and improve the environment over the next 30, 40 years.
It's been a real pleasure chatting with you. It's just so interesting to hear such a broad perspective of how Lean Startup is inserted into many of these different really ambitious projects. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing and for striving for that impact. And thank you for sharing some of your stories here today. This was awesome. Thank you.
Jonathan, I couldn't thank you enough for the opportunity to borrow your platform to share some of the work we're doing. I will say again, I want to land on this. I like to tell people our big dream and kind of where we're going, right? We want to deploy about $1 billion worth of capital. We want to develop about 100 projects. This is our 2030 target, right? We want to get a return of 30% plus ROI to investors. We want to vet about 300 projects and finance about 100 of them. We want to deploy about $1 billion worth of blended finance, so that's grants and concessional equity and debt. We want to train and certify over 10,000 professionals in climate tech and impact infrastructure. We want to deliver annual CO2 emission reduction of up to 0.5 gigaton across all of our portfolio. So we want to build the world's most valuable and impactful company that has climate tech and infrastructure projects in the global South. So that's our big, bold mission. And we focus on sectors, like we say, like energy, agriculture, data, healthcare, industry, and real estate. So we invite those who are interested in this kind of an audacious mission to reach out to us. We're very excited about the work we're doing. We think we're just scraping at kind of what innovation can do for the rest of the world. And so we're excited to use Lean Startup to do this. Thank you so much.
It's been great, Ngu. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Jonathan.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. If it resonates with you and you're interested in exploring how Lean Startup approach could help your team or your organization solve similar challenges, I'd love to connect. We can have a chat. There's no cost, just 15 minutes. And we can get on a call and exchange ideas and see what's possible. You can grab a time with me using the link in the notes below, and I really look forward to having a conversation with you.